At 5:30 local time over the dark waters of the Sea of Azov, a Russian unmanned corvette sat poised to unleash death. 8-caliber cruise missiles were armed, fueled, and ready, each capable of reaching a Ukrainian city within minutes. The crew of 70 men believed they were untouchable, wrapped in layers of radar jamming suites and surface-to-air defenses. It was routine, another dawn of mechanical destruction. But this dawn would not belong to them. Unseen beyond the horizon, 7 Ukrainian drones were already hunting, moving low, fast and silent. Their mission wasn't just to strike a ship, it was to rewrite the balance of power in the Sea of Azov. For months, Russia had ruled this stretch of water uncontested, turning it into a launch platform for precision terror. But on this morning, Ukraine decided to flip the script. What followed wasn't a battle, it was an algorithmic ambush. The lead drone, codename Rybaka-1, descended to treetop level, skimming the coastline at 400 km/h. At the first Russian checkpoint, 23mm tracers tore through the sky like comets. The gunner fired at the sound, not the sight, the mechanical whine of electric rotors echoing between warehouses. Rybaka-1 juked left, pushing its motors to 432 km/h, slicing through a corridor of flame. It made it through, but the damage was done. Gunfire rolled across the water, echoing for 10 kilometers. Telegram channels lit up with urgent messages, enemy drones inbound. Every Russian outpost from Berdyansk to Primorsk went on alert. The element of surprise was gone. Still, the Ukrainian operators didn't flinch. Inside a bunker 300 kilometers away, the drone pilots stared into the static of flickering video feeds. Power lines, radio towers, and fog distorted every signal. For 3 agonizing seconds, Rybaka-1 flew blind, navigating not by eyes but by instinct and gyroscopes. Then the image cleared, metal towers flashing by inches from the lens. 2 more drones followed close behind, codenamed Spear-1 and Spear-2. Their task: destroy the ship's radar defenses before the main strike team arrived. Further north, 4 slower Bober-class drones cruised in at 200 km/h, carrying the heavy warheads, the hammers that would finish the job once the Rybakas opened the path. But Russia had anticipated drone warfare. Along the coastal highway, a Repellent-1 jammer sat waiting, its 400-watt transmitter flooding the spectrum with electromagnetic chaos. The lead Bober's video feed went black. Connection lost. For a moment, it seemed the mission was dead. Then quietly the system switched. Autonomous mode engaged. The Bober didn't fall, it adapted. Guided only by its internal accelerometers and optical mapping, it continued forward, blind but unstoppable. 3 minutes later, the feed came back. The drone was exactly where it should be. But ahead, a BTR-82 armored vehicle blocked the road, its heavy machine guns sweeping in preset arcs. The operator dove low, weaving between factories, hiding among buildings. Bullets sparked against walls, but the drone held 10 meters altitude, low enough to vanish from radar behind the Earth's own curvature. Soldiers fired wildly, chasing shadows and noise. Then a hit. The third Rybaka took a direct 23mm burst. The explosion turned it into a plume of fire over an empty parking lot. 5 drones remained. 5 machines carrying the hopes of a country that refused to be silent. Over the water, Rybaka-1 crested the final ridge, and the operator froze. The mission brief had been wrong. The enemy ship wasn't just defended by guns. It was guarded by Panzer-M systems, new generation anti-drone interceptors Russia had quietly installed weeks earlier. And in 4 seconds, those systems would fire. At 5:34 a.m., the calm surface of the Sea of Azov erupted into chaos. The Panzer-M aboard the unmanned corvette came alive, its radar dishes spinning as launch tubes angled skyward. Inside, the Russian fire control officer's hands hovered over the console. The ship's sensors had just locked onto a single blip, Rybaka-1 charging straight toward them at 432 km/h. 6 missiles roared from their tubes, white flames scorching the deck. These weren't standard anti-air rounds, they were anti-drone interceptors, each a 12-kilogram dart carrying a fragmentation warhead packed with 200 tungsten spheres. When detonated, those spheres would expand outward at 1,800 meters per second, forming a donut-shaped cloud of death. No drone could survive it, but the Rybaka operator knew something the Russians didn't. He had studied the Panzer-M's engagement sequence for months. He knew the system carried a built-in flaw, a 1.2-second arming delay on its proximity fuses designed to prevent missiles from detonating too close to the launcher. At 432 kilometers, the Rebecca could cross 144 meters in that time. The operator's mind became a calculator. He saw the exhaust flares, 6 of them, and pushed his control stick forward. The drone dove. The first missile streaked overhead unarmed. The second passed within 5 meters, its fuse still cold. In that split second, the Rebecca used the enemy's safety system as armor. By the time the interceptors armed the drone was already below them, racing through their kill zone untouched. It leveled out at 5 meters altitude, skimming so close to the water that its own downwash kicked up spray. On the operator's feed, the radar mast of the Bayern M filled the screen, a tower of metal and electronics feeding targeting data to every launcher within 200 kilometers. The Panzer's twin 30mm cannons opened fire, cycling 5,000 rounds per minute per barrel. In theory, it was a wall of steel. In practice, it was a delay problem. The fire control algorithm needed 1.5 seconds to calculate trajectory, 0.5 seconds for servo motors to aim, and another 1.5 seconds for shells to travel 2 kilometers. That's a 3.5-second lag, and the drone changed direction every 2 seconds. The math never aligned. The Rebecca zigzagged like an electric ghost. Every correction it made threw off the Kalman prediction filters of the Russian computer. By the time the gunner fired, he was shooting at history. Then came impact. The Rebecca's shaped charge detonated against the Podlet K1 radar, the ship's main eyes. The explosion triggered the Monroe effect, a shaped blast collapsing a copper cone into a hypersonic jet, moving at 7,000 meters per second. The molten metal didn't melt through the armor, it punched through it, a needle of copper, slicing through layers of electronics and steel. Within milliseconds, the radar array was shredded. The command processors, antenna modules, and operator consoles disintegrated. The first Rebecca was gone, but its death was worth a fleet's ransom. The second Rebecca came in moments later, targeting the P-18 spoon-rest early warning radar. The Panzer M, switching to thermal backup, tried to reacquire, but nature itself betrayed it. The warming dawn created a temperature inversion layer, bending infrared light and creating false heat signatures. The drone's electric motors, running barely 10 degrees above ambient, blended into the landscape. Against the cooling sea, it appeared as a cold spot, then disappeared entirely. The Panzer fired blindly, its thermal algorithm chasing ghosts. 5,000 rounds later, no hits. The second Rebecca dove through the chaos and struck the P-18 dead center. A second flash, another radar destroyed. With both the Podlet K1 and P-18 gone, the Bayern M corvette was suddenly naked. Its radar range collapsed from 200 kilometers to 40. The ship that had planned to rain missiles on Ukrainian cities now saw only a blank horizon. For the Russian crew, panic set in. The captain barked orders for evasive maneuvers, but physics laughed at him. A 949-ton vessel can't turn fast enough to outrun light-speed threats. It needed 15 seconds to change heading by 30 degrees. The Ukrainian drones could pivot in 50 milliseconds. The final approach began. 3 Bober-class drones, the heavy hitters, skimmed low over the waves. Their operators coordinated from bunkers 300 kilometers inland, linked through frequency-hopping, encrypted channels that danced across 128 frequencies per second, a pattern no jammer could follow. On board the Bayern M, the TK-25E electronic warfare suite blasted 200 watts across the spectrum, trying to drown the drone's signals. It failed. The interference caused pixelation, video dropping from 1080p to 480p, but the feed stayed alive. Through static, one operator whispered, "Visual confirmed. Target lock." At 500 meters, the drones split formation. 2 went wide to flank 1 dove straight for the mast. The AK-630M2 Duet close-in weapon system spun up a mechanical Banshee, unleashing 10,000 rounds per minute. But its Kalman filter-based targeting was designed for P-270 Mosquet missiles, massive, predictable, fast-moving weapons. These drones were none of that. They were small, erratic, and human-guided. The ship's computers needed 3.5 seconds to generate a fire solution. The drones changed course every 2 seconds. It was over before the system caught up. At 200 meters, Bober 1 dropped below the gun's depression arc. Sailors with PKM machine guns fired from the deck, But human eyes couldn't track what they couldn't process. A drone moving 100 meters in under a second doesn't give you time to aim, only to flinch. Then came impact. The Bober-shaped charge hit the radar mast 6 meters of critical electronics. The detonation severed every communication link on the ship. Screens went black. The Buoy-M, once a floating missile battery, was now blind, deaf, and dumb. The second Bober dove for the ship's port side, aiming for the seam between frames 44 and 52, where the Caliber missile magazine sat behind 15 millimeters of steel plating. Its operator took a breath, adjusted for 8 knots of drift, and fired. The explosion hit like Judgment Day. At 5:39 a.m., the Bober 2 struck home. Its shaped charge, an inverted copper cone surrounded by high explosive, activated the Monroe effect, turning solid metal into a hypersonic jet of molten copper, moving at 7,000 meters per second. The 15mm steel plating of the Buoy-M corvette might as well have been paper. The jet punched through the port hull at frame 44, slicing clean through the Caliber missile magazine. Inside, 8 missiles sat armed and fueled their gyroscopes, humming as they awaited launch commands that would never come. The copper jet sprayed through the compartment, searing electronics, rupturing hydraulic lines, and igniting fragments of rocket fuel. In the confined space, pressure waves collided and amplified, fire meeting oxygen, oxygen-feeding detonation. In the command tower, alarms screamed. The captain of the Buoy-M, a man who'd spent decades believing in Russian naval supremacy, could only watch as the ship's systems failed in cascade. Hydraulic fluid compressed to 3,000 psi vented across broken electrical panels, triggering arc fires that burned hotter than plasma cutters. Coolant lines burst, releasing toxic vapors into corridors. Then the safety interlocks failed, warhead arming circuits disconnected, leaving 8 Caliber missiles live volatile and unlaunchable. In the bunker 300 kilometers away, the Ukrainian drone operators could see it all in their degraded video feeds, a ship glowing from within, burning from its own power. One of them whispered almost reverently, "We broke the circuit." The sea reflected the fire like molten glass. By 05:42 a.m., internal detonations shook the corvette. Secondary blasts from ammunition stores blew open the hull. Yet somehow the ship did not sink. The Buoy-M had been built with sealed bulkheads meant to withstand damage but not humiliation. Its superstructure was shredded, its radar mast gone, its communication arrays vaporized, and its engines stalling under thermal overload. 12 minutes later, the once lethal warship was dead in the water, a $500 million weapon platform reduced to a drifting carcass of blackened steel. For the Ukrainians, the battle was over, but the mission wasn't. 2 remaining Bober drones circled from the north, their operators scanning through the static for confirmation. What they saw was astonishing. The ship was still afloat, smoke rising in thick black plumes. Sailors clustered on deck, waving improvised white flags made from thermal blankets. No missiles had launched. 8 Caliber warheads meant for Ukrainian cities remained sealed and silent. The drones turned away. The job was done. Hours later, the crippled Buoy-M corvette limped back toward Berdyansk, escorted by patrol boats. The damage report would later read like a disaster report from a different century. Radar suite destroyed. Command and control lost. Propulsion limited to 20% output. Weapon systems inoperative. Recovery would take at least 18 months, assuming sanctions didn't choke the supply of replacement parts. The strike's return on investment was brutal and brilliant. The Ukrainian operation had cost less than $1 million, assembled from commercial drone parts and open-source software. In exchange, they had neutralized a $500 million warship and its 8 precision missiles. A 500-to-1 trade. Even in the language of Wall Street, that's not warfare, it's leverage. And at that moment, as the crippled corvette dragged itself toward Port 1, truth crystallized across every command post from Kiev to Washington. This wasn't just the destruction of a ship, it was the death of an era, the day information and improvisation sank the illusion of invincibility. The Sea of Azov, once dominated by Russian guns, now belonged to whoever could think faster. By 06:30 a.m., the flames aboard the crippled Buoy-M corvette were visible from the coastline near Mariupol. Russian emergency radio channels were jammed with fragmented calls for assistance. The Sea of Azov, once considered a Russian stronghold, now echoed with silence, a silence that spoke louder than explosions. For the Kremlin, this wasn't just a tactical failure. It was a humiliation broadcast in real time. The Boyanim centerpiece of regional missile dominance had been rendered combat ineffective by less than a dozen civilian-grade drones and a handful of Ukrainian operators sitting 300 kilometers away. Reports flooded Moscow within hours. Satellite imagery confirmed what the sailors could not deny: the ship's radar mass sheared away, its Kaliber launch cells melted and deformed. The Russian Navy's supposed technological edge-layered radars, jammers, autocannons had failed catastrophically against machines costing less than the fuel in their own missiles. It came from how fast you could think. For Ukraine, this was more than a victory at sea. It was a signal to allies and adversaries alike that ingenuity can still outpace empire. For Russia, it was a haunting lesson. Supremacy built on routine is the easiest to break. And for the United States and NATO, it was a mirror held to the future. In the wars ahead, the next great fleets won't be forged in steel. They'll be coded, networked, and flown by unseen hands. When the smoke settled over the Sea of Azov, one truth gleamed through: the battlefield belongs to those who can adapt faster than the world can react. If you believe knowledge and strategy are the first shields of peace, like, share, and subscribe. Because the war for tomorrow isn't being fought with bullets anymore. It's being fought with ideas.